Welcome back to EDH Deck Building. I'm your host Demo, and this is my Goat Tribal deck tech. You know, this is sort of an interesting study in deck building 101, if you will, where if you can't really build the deck the way that you typically would, then what do, right? There just isn't enough goats to actually build a deck, all right? You know, if you go on Gatherer, like I always do when I do my deck research, there's actually only 10 goats, okay, in the entire Commander format. And most of them are really bad. I mean, they're in red for the most part. Red, there's a couple green ones, there's a couple white ones. But for the most part, they're terrible. There's a couple that are okay. The first thing I think of when people talk about goats is tokens. I think of goat tokens. So I think of cards like Trading Post and Springjack Pasture. Those are the first cards that I think of when I think of making goat tokens. And that, I think, is a better strategy to go with because these are repeatable effects, right? Rather than relying on, I mean, there's just no way you can build your deck around 10 cards and just hope you get a couple of them in play. And if you don't, then what are you doing? And a lot of people will build a tribal deck. They'll say, oh, my deck's goat tribal. And then they'll have 2 goats in there. And really their deck's not goat tribal at all. It's like people who play Animorph decks and it's really just an Animar deck. But they put like 2 morph cards in there and then call it an Animorph deck. I'm being real genuine here when I call this goat tribal. So we are going to build our deck around Springjack, Pasture, and Trading Post because these are repeatable effects that are going to be making us goat tokens. So that's the strategy we go with. We go with the strategy of it's a token deck. We're going to be making 01 goat tokens. How do we make a deck out of that? So first off, our commander. Our commander is going to be Zirda the Dawn Waker for multiple reasons, which I will get to. But the main reason is that reducing our activated abilities doesn't do anything with Trading Post, unfortunately, because it only costs 1 already. But our Springjack Pasture is going to cost now only 2 to activate, which is going to be really, really helpful. I also decided on Boros for the deck because there's only a couple of green goats and they're not very good. So Springjack Shepherd is the other card that is going to make us enough goat tokens that it's worthwhile to put it in the deck. Again, Zirda, it does have 2 pips there, 2 hybrid pips that are white. So if we just have Zirda and Springjack Shepherd, that's at least going to get us 3 goats. Hopefully we're going to have some more than that though. And we also have Anointed Procession, obviously, because our main strategy is making tokens. Anointed Procession is going to be fantastic. I'll just say right now, I put Enlightened Tutor in the deck because there's at least 5 or 6 really good enchantments and or artifacts in this deck that we want to be having in play. I talk about price, you know, once in a while. I don't know the price of things really that much. I do know the cards that are really expensive, but if a card's sort of in the middle, I don't really know. Is this expensive? Probably. It's not cheap, but if you can afford to throw it in, it's definitely going to help you out in the deck. I also have Recruiter of the Guard and Imperial Recruiter. Both of these can get our Springjack Shepherd. Again, they are probably expensive. I know Imperial Recruiter is kind of expensive, so tutors are just going to help us to do what we're doing. You can still make the deck without the tutors. It's just going to make it a little more difficult to get the pieces that you want. That's all. I mean, we all know how it works, right? So the strategy I'm building around here is, okay, well, just making a bunch of 01 tokens. What good is that, right? I mean, how are we going to win with that? Especially in Boros, right? So we got to pump up those tokens. And because we have Zirda the Dawn Waker, I found a couple of cards that just work magnificently in this deck. Gerard's Battle Cry and Akron Phalanx. Because of that ability that Zirda has that reduces our costs, Gerard's Battle Cry only costs 1 white mana to pump our whole team. And Akron Phalanx is going to cost 1 red mana to pump our whole team, right? Gerard's Battle Cry is the best one here. It only costs 1, and it does the +1/+1, whereas the Akron Phalanx only does +1/+0. However, the strategy we're using, it shouldn't really matter that much, and I will get to why. First of all, I'll also throw out Perforos, God of the Forge. Also going to be fantastic in this deck. He has that pump ability, and again, we can reduce it with Zirda, so it's only 1 red to pump our whole team. But also his main ability, right, the ability that people build decks around, because we're going to be making lots of tokens, that also works in this deck too. So he's a huge win con. Again, another card, an enchantment that we really want to be having in play. Because we're making 01 tokens, and I just did this in my Maya deck, and this is why I made a Maya deck, because I actually had made this deck before, and I thought this strategy would work good with Maya as well. And the strategy, if you saw my Maya deck, is we're just going to be hating on big creatures. All of our creatures are 01s, you know, except our commander, obviously. Dusk to Dawn is going to be fantastic, of course. Fell the Mighty is going to be even better because we're going to aim it at, right? We're going to destroy all creatures with power greater than target creature's power, which is going to be an 0/1 goat. So it's going to kill everything except for our goats, right? So that's going to be fantastic. We also have Marble Titan and Meekstone again. So the big creatures are just not going to be untapping at all. Mentor of the Meek and Inspiring Commander are going to be allowing us to draw cards off of our 0/1 goats. I talked about Inspiring Commander in my Maya deck tech quite a bit about how it is actually an arena card. Play it if you want. If your play group or whoever is okay with it, use it. If they're not, whatever. I mean, it's a magic card, so I don't think there's any reason you shouldn't be able to use it. Also have Retribution of the Meek, Slaughter the Strong. I mean, we just have so much hate against big creatures here. I particularly like Slaughter the Strong, right? Because you're going to choose total power of 4 or less, and we do have our Zirda, right? So our Zirda isn't loving all of the big creature hate. This is the only difference between this deck and the Maya deck, is Maya actually gets under that bar of having 2 power. Zirda doesn't, so Zirda will die to a lot of these effects. But Slaughter the Strong is perfect because we can pick Zirda to cover that 4 power, and then all of our goats are zeros. So that we can have 1,000 goats in play, they'll all survive. So Slaughter the Strong is great. I also really like Noetic Scales. This is a great one. I've had it in a deck before. It's a little, taxy, staxy-ish, not a card that people will love, but man, it's just, when you're playing Go Tribal, I don't care. Whine all you want that your big creatures don't stay in play. I don't care. I'm playing Go Tribal. All right. During each player's upkeep, return to owner's hand each creature that player controls with power greater than the number of cards in his or her hand. So our goats are all 0/1s. So they're never going to leave play. It doesn't matter. We have no cards in hand. This is going to get all the big creatures off the table, right? If there's any creatures that have a power greater than 7, they're probably going to get bounced every single turn and they're not going to be able to get used. Later in the game, as people's hands get smaller, this really comes into play. The style we're using, again, because we have that Gerard's Battle Cry and the Acrone Phalanx, our creatures aren't going to be affected on our upkeep, right? On our upkeep, it's going to look at our creature's power and go, oh, they're all zeros, right? Or on our untap step, it'll look at Marble Titan and Meekstone and go, oh, they're all zeros. They're fine. They untap normally. Then we're going to pump them up. Or we're going to Dustodon, wipe the board of all the big creatures. Then we're going to pump it up, right? That's why these temporary pump effects work so well in this deck. Another thing we can do is Raid Bombardment, right? Whenever a creature you control with power 2 or less attacks, it deals 1 damage to a player or planeswalker. Again, these pump effects we can use whenever we want. So we can declare all our goats as attackers. Here comes the herd of goats. It's a bunch of 0/1s, and our opponents laugh at us, right? It deals the 1 damage from Raid Bombardment, and then once that trigger's already on the stack, then we pump them, right? So the timing here is important. Ensnaring Bridge, this is the one that's really going to lock things up for us, I think. Creatures with power greater than the number of cards in your hand can't attack. It just prevents big creatures from attacking. Again, this is just going to advantage us. We attack with our goats, then after they've been declared as an attacker, then we pump them, right? It doesn't matter how big they are after they're already attacking. That's the strategy we're going for, and I think it really works well in this deck. I also have Animal Sanctuary in here. I mean, heck, why not, right? Put a +1/+1 counter on target bird, cat, dog, or goat. Why not? We do have a couple of those effects. I also have Tajic, Legion's Blade, and Aurelia that have that mentor ability. But I didn't just put them in for the mentor ability, right? That's a little underwhelming. They both have other abilities that we really want. Okay, so Aurelia is going to give +2/+0 and Vigilance to one of our goats as well. So now we're getting to a point where it's an actual formidable attacker. So if we attack with an 0/1 goat, give it +2/+0, now it's a 2/1, then put a counter on it, now it's a 3/2. That's not bad, right? Put another counter on it with Animal Sanctuary, now it's a 4/3. That's reasonable, right? It's a reasonable attacker. And then Tajic has that ability of prevent all non-combat damage that would be dealt to other creatures you control, which is important because we're in red. Right? We're in red and we do have effects like Chain Reaction and Blasphemous Act. Just like with the Dust Dawn, it's going to wipe everyone else's creatures and not ours. Those one-sided board wipes are going to be fantastic. And Blasphemous Act is fantastic in this deck for another reason. One of the only actual goats I put in the deck, Stormwild Caprador. When I first saw this guy, I was like, man, this guy's incredible. Non-combat damage would be dealt to Stormwild Caprador, prevent that damage, and put that many +1/+1 counters on it. So Blasphemous Act, all the damage damage gets prevented, and then we put 13 +1/+1 counters on it. Now we have a 14/16 flying goat. That is just a combo that I thought, why not put it in here? You know, I mean, we're playing goats, we're in Boros. I mean, we already are going to have Blasphemous Act anyway. Why not, right? So it's just a really neat combo that I just ended up throwing in the deck because why not? It fits. Other things we're doing in the deck, I like Fury Stoke Giant in the deck because we're going to have all these little goat tokens sitting around, right? Fury Stoke Giant comes into play and says, okay, all of your goats now can ping for 2 damage until end of turn. That's pretty fantastic. And it has persist, so if it dies, comes back, we get to do it all over again. I think that's really, really good. Rootborn Defenses, you know, we want to just protect our creatures anyway. You know, as I've said a few times before, if you're playing any creature heavy deck, you got to have these kind of effects that are going to save your board because it can be a blowout if somebody just board wipes and kills all your stuff. And then just to finish things off, you know, because we are playing Zirda, might as well take advantage of that a little bit. I didn't want to go too much down that road, but why not put some cards in the deck that are going to help us anyway? So Lithoform Engine is great because now we can copy those abilities, right? So copy target activated or triggered ability you control. So we can pay 1, make a goat, and then we're going to pay 1 to copy an activated or triggered ability because it's going to be reduced by Zirda. And so for 2 mana, we're getting 2 goats. That's pretty good. And then copy target permanent spell you control. Again, this is going to be reduced by Zirda, so it's only going to cost 2. So if we cast a trading post, now we can copy the whole trading post, right? Or if we cast a Springjack Shepherd, now we can copy the Springjack Shepherd and it's going to come into play and we can double the effect. And then I have Sentinel Flute and Planar Portal. Again, both just really good cards. Their cost is going to be reduced by Zirda. So Planar Portal is 4 mana. You know, again, Tutors is going to be great in any deck where you're trying to assemble combos. We don't really have quote unquote combos. There's just a lot of cards in this deck that we really, really want to have. And Planar Portal is going to be good for going and getting them. And Sentinel Flute, again, this just works on creatures. Another card that probably not a lot of people have seen. It's a really good card. You know, you just search your library for a creature card with converted mana cost X and put it in your hand. So we can go get our Springjack Shepherd, or we can go get any other creature in our deck that's going to be really handy. If we don't have any of our big creature hate effects, we can go get Marble Titan. If we have a Blasphemous Act in our hand, we can go get Stormwild Caprador. And it's going to be reduced by 2, right? That Stormwild Caprador is going to cost us 1 mana to go get out of our deck. And then I threw an Unwinding Clock in here as well. We do have quite a bit of artifacts. Again, I didn't want to go too much away from our Goat Tribal deck that we are making here, but why not have Unwinding Clock so that we can use that Planar Portal on everyone's turn, or we can use that Trading Post on everyone's turn. So that's pretty much the deck. If you sit down and start playing this deck, I'm just thinking, I wonder how long it'll take for people to figure out you're playing Goat Tribal. Probably will take them a while, because just playing a Trading Post is obviously, that goes in a lot of decks, so that they're not going to figure it out there. Maybe the Springjack Shepherd will give it away. I don't know. Like I said with the power level and the difficulty level when I talked about that, the difficulty level for this is sort of high just because there is certain cards you want to put together to make things work, and there is timing issues with attacking and whatnot. The power level is pretty good though. You know, I would probably give this a 6 for sure, because I'm always putting lots of cards in my deck to even out the playing field, right? Remember, removal wins games. It doesn't matter what strategy you have. If you can just stop your opponent from what they're doing, you're always going to have a chance, right? So that is it for today. That is my Goat Tribal deck. Thanks for tuning in.